Welcome back to the Executive Outlook. Today's guest is someone who has been living and breathing the Microsoft data platform for decades, long before the Power BI, long before Azure, and long before anyone was talking about the Microsoft Fabrics. So, Markus is a consultant, author, and Microsoft platform expert based of Austria. He has spent his career helping organizations across the full data pipeline from finding and ingesting data to building the ETL processes and data warehouses, all the way to the Power BI and reporting analytics. He is also an author of data modeling with Microsoft Power BI and one of the respected voices in the data community globally. Nice to have you on the show, Markus.
Thank you, Isha.
So let's begin that you have been into the business intelligence and data for decades. So how did it start for you and what got you hooked into this space from an early on?
So it's really early on. I think it was 13 or 14 in the last year of the school I attended. Bank provided us with those portable computers, and portable computers in that time they were different, right? The big machines, but they were like turned down, and like on the front you could like detach a keyboard, and there was this 7-inch brown monochromatic display, which was just a console, and there was 2 floppy disks where you could then store your programs and your data. And this was really interesting because like this was this big machines. On the one hand, they were very sensitive. The teacher made sure that we didn't touch the floppy disk on the wrong side. I'm sure if anybody of you can remember floppy disks, but there were like this gap, and then you could touch the magnetic thing there. It would not be good because you would destroy the floppy disk. On the other hand, if you wrote, I think we wrote in BASIC, I think this was BASIC programming language, and if you made some misspells, typos, right, the program did not really work. Like error message we didn't really understand. So this was very interesting from that perspective. But on the other hand, I got the impression if I really mastered these commands, this query language or programming language, tool could do anything for me, right? This was like science fiction in real life. Having this machine where you could like put in repeating tasks and only like tell it once, and then it could do this over and over again. And I think the example we had to program was like a calculator. So we wrote like this input thing where we put a number and another number, and then would spit out like immediately the result, no matter how big the number was. And this was really interesting. So I got really hooked onto that. And happens that like I had to change school anyways, because like the system also is that with the age of 14 you have to decide what to continue, like want to become a carpenter and then have like vocational training on the works, or for example attend a vocational training school, which is like 5 years, where you have all the things you do in high school, like mathematics and English and German, and of course history lessons and all those things. But on the other hand, there was a huge emphasis into programming and business. I got a training as a bookkeeper of business consultant, so to speak. And on the other hand, there was programming things. In the first class, we're taught Turbo Pascal, which was like this integrated IDE where you ran like Visual Code today. You run your code and then you write the code, you have like some help there, and then you run the code insert there. You could have hit F1 and get some manuals and those things. In second class, we then were taught to C and assembler. In the third class, we had object orientation, C++, and very importantly, SQL. We wrote our first SQL statements and learned what an inner join and outer join is, all those things. And yeah, this never let go. This is what I then heavily used in my later career then after finishing school. So I can say that I write SQL statements since over 3 decades now.
Amazing. That sounds something interesting. And over the 3 decades, SQL have not changed.
Almost not. Yes.
We got different platform for the SQL writing, but actually it has not changed.
I mean, something changed because I can remember when I heavily came into SQL Server, I was wondering why I couldn't remember left join and right join and inner join and those keywords. I could not remember, and then looked up my handbooks from those time, and this was not there because the inner join and outer join, those keywords, they were first becoming part of the SQL, I think in 1999. So this was after I finished my school, and this was like an eye opener. Oh, something changed there. I mean, the language is like 50 years old or 56 years old, I think, right? In 1970, this guy got invented, or yeah, do you say invented? I'm not sure. Yeah, he thought about the concept of relational databases and also the structure query language. But yeah, there were some changes, but basically it's still the same thing. We could also do those in and out joins, but I think this was like with plus equal. I can't remember. It's so long
Yes.
ago that you could write those in and out joins. Keywords were a little bit different, and there were no predicates, no on clause, right? So what we did is we had only the where clause, and with the where clause we did all the connections between the tables you joined together.
And still it is the most powerful language. So I was having a discussion with someone and over the SQL warehouses versus the PySpark execution, and which is more
Hmm.
effective, and how should we basically optimize our cost for the cloud platform. So what they have suggested, and we were having a
Hmm.
talk, that SQL warehouses still perform in terms of cost effectiveness, are on a higher side if you want to run the batch processes, and if you
Hmm.
want to run the millions of records. And PySpark, Python is still, from the costing perspective, are not that much powerful. Yes, in the execution perspective it differs, but if we want to go with a cost optimized solution with more powerful and less time and batch processing. So SQL is the go-to thing.
Yeah, still. And also, if you think about this no SQL, no SQL databases, they also
Yeah.
start like sooner or later to invent or provide a SQL API, because this is a very widespread kind of language, and why to reinvent the wheel with every new database system, right? I think
Mm.
mastering a little bit, at least mastering SQL is really helpful, no matter what kind of database you end up to work with.
Absolutely. So you are a Microsoft expert. So
Hmm.
right now, one of the evolving product for Microsoft is Microsoft Fabric. So
Hmm.
how it is different from the normal Azure SQL and other Microsoft platforms. So what's the difference between a Microsoft Fabrics versus other Microsoft platforms?
The thing is, that Microsoft Fabric is based on the other toolings and the other services. You could look at Microsoft Fabric as something which is both old wine in new bottles and something ground shaking innovation, because like it's based on those tools. If you already know how Azure works, like there's an Azure SQL database or there's Azure Data Flows, other things. If you already know those things, you will recognize them easily in Microsoft Fabric again, because what they did is like they built an umbrella over it and make it more easy to connect to those things security wise and UI wise, because this is a huge problem in many projects, right? If the project is not very, very simple, just very simple, then you have to use many or several of those tools, maybe several tools within Microsoft, but also maybe from other vendors. And this increases complexity of the implementation, because yeah, you have to learn different UIs, you have to find about the different licenses, you have to maybe different security settings, and you have to sync and all of them, right? And here Fabric comes into offering you everything in this like Power BI like user interface, where we have workspaces and there are things in there. So this is then like yeah, just existing things put together from that perspective.
Okay.
On the other hand,
Hmm.
if you think about what's groundbreaking, is that all the data in Fabric is stored in this OneLake, right? I mean, there's also lake houses, Azure. You have also Azure. In Azure, you have also this. You can store files there, right? Now I'm
Yeah.
looking at the terms. Yeah, Azure file
Azure
system. Yeah,
Lakehouse.
they are not only the lakehouse, but also like just the files there, right? And
Hmm.
a lakehouse is nothing else, right? Than like putting umbrella over those files. And this is what is done in Fabric through all of the workloads, right? So Power BI is a very important workload called workload in Fabric, but there's also lakehouse, warehouse, event house, data flows, Gen 2, notebooks, pipelines, all those things are workloads in there. And all of those can create and also read from the OneLake. So this is groundbreaking, I would say, because you can imagine that somebody like uploads a file to the lakehouse or uses a notebook in Python, because this is what this person is really good at. You use your Python skills and then manage to convert, transform, learn something from those files, and again store it in the lakehouse as a file or lakehouse table. And then you might have other people in your team organization which are not that good in Python, but they use T-SQL maybe for many years maybe. And the cool thing is that they can just access these tables from the lakehouse as it would be a SQL database table. So you have all your statistical knowledge, can run your functions, can run your procedures, and again, transform the data and store it again. And maybe other people in your organization, they need to gain information from that, but they don't know about anything about Python. They have maybe already rudimentary skills in T-SQL, but they could work with Power BI, right? So you can have those tables, no matter if created in the lakehouse, in the warehouse, event house, whatever. Those tables can be part of a semantic model, and you don't have to import it to the semantic model. The semantic model can just access those tables as it would be an imported table. So the performance is a little bit less good than it would be if it's really imported, but it's way faster than using the direct query connector. So I think this is groundbreaking, right? Making those skills in your team better work together, right? People can work together with their specific skills, but there's nothing lost in transformation because you have to find an API from Python to access this database and then find something about accessing a CSV file from T-SQL. No, that's not necessary. Everything is stored in this OneLake, and this is really, really a groundbreaking thing. And the OneLake itself, this is based on Delta Parquet file format, which is like a standard open source standard. All the lake houses uses this standard, so there's nothing where Microsoft put an proprietary logic into it, but it's just a data packet file. Could also be read with any other tool which can process a data packet file. So this is something, some of the things which are new, and other innovations are also coming. If you think about snapshots and shortcuts, so they're basically the same thing. Shortcuts are for files, snapshots are for database tables, where you can have like those files which are stored at any other places. So not stored inside. So the shortcut, the snapshot is stored in there, but the data is not stored in the Fabric workspace, but it's still residing on, I don't know, AWS or in a local on-prem SQL Server database, right? And these tools allow you that you access those data, this data, as it would be stored would have been stored in Fabric. So it's just an element there, and you can access the file or the table as it would have been stored in Fabric. And Fabric managed to synchronize the data between the vendor and the file at the other place, and also the tables. It mirrors the content of the tables constantly for you, so you don't have to copy and paste copy everything on a scheduled basis, but you can expect it's like up to date when you access it. And this is also one of the innovations there. Or another one is like the OneLake security, where you put in security on a column in your lakehouse, and then the security options are inherited to all the other workloads. So if you access it with SQL, this information that the data might be sensitive and not be seen by everybody is also inherited to SQL and also into Power BI. So if somebody accesses this, then you can't see the content of a certain column if you don't have the right permissions to actually see the content. So this is things that are different to the Azure services, while some things are still very similar and also based on the Azure services.
So basically, earlier there were a lot of challenges that were coming, that when we have to access the data at different place, we have to link it to the connector, or we will have to do the syncing, one-to-one syncing. Okay, that is available in the Redshift, and now I'm using SQL Server. I want to connect it, so you need to sync, have a job syncing from there to here every time, right? So all of those
Exactly.
problem has been solved with the Fabric. So we can have that connected, and it will gonna manage on its own about the syncing or from different sources to, so that it can have one lake house, and we can just connect with the Power BI directly in order to
Exactly.
get the information what we need.
Yeah, makes many things much more easier.
Amazing. This is and I think this is Microsoft Azure is coming up with a Fabric product similar to what they have it in Databricks. So it is like a
Yeah,
competitor that is happening, right? So
definitely, right? There's Azure Databricks, but this doesn't mean that Microsoft doesn't try to mimic things there and put everything directly into Fabric. Exactly.
and what is the costing perspective like? Because this is the factor that comes into any adoption, any time of adoption of Fabric or other platforms, right? So because that is the major thing, that okay, as a company, as an organization, what will be the costing if I choose the Microsoft Fabric? So is it lesser than what it has to be with the SQL Server and other areas, or it is comparatively on a higher side?
That's a very hard question. because Fabric uses these consumption units, right? So with a F64, you have 64 consumption units, and then those consumption units are consumed by your services as you use them, right? So if there's no queries, nothing is running on your Fabric capacity, then you're not consuming anything, right? You pay a little bit for the storage. It's comparably cheap, but really comparing and finding expectation level of what kind of capacity you will need in order to fulfill all the requests of this analytic platform, this is a really hard question. And the answer of Microsoft is you should start with the Fabric trial, right? You can sign up for a trial. And I think you can keep it for 30 days or 60 days. Sometimes they're changing things. And then you have to learn, right? You put in some proof of concepts, build things there. And while you go, you learn how many consumption will be there on this different workload. If you do the same transformation in T-SQL, it might cost less, as Isha already pointed out, than if you do the same consumption or the same transformation PySpark, for example. So this is something you have to learn and then find out what kind of expectations you can have in terms of what can you do and what will you cost in terms of what kind of capacity you will need. You consume it as you go, but you pay a fixed amount per month, right? And then you do have these consumptions. Microsoft is helping a little bit with like leveling out requests, so you can like consume more at the current point in time, as long as you pay back, so to speak, so you use less in the following 24 hours. So you could have like a lot of interactions during the day. If there's only a little bit of transformations over the night, you might be fine. But there might
Hmm.
be some points in time where you eat more from the consumptions than your Fabric capacity offers you. And then you have several options, right? You can either pay extra for getting these things done, or you can freeze the Fabric until you pay it back, so to speak, in the next 24
Hmm.
hours. So it's very, very important that you have an eye on your Fabric capacity metrics app. So there's an app
Right.
available from Microsoft which shows you on which point in time and which services consumed your capacity units. So you can like proactively find out before those are ate up that maybe you have to tune some of the queries. You have, yeah, there's different options, right? You can do to make more with less consumption, right?
So another question I have, this is out of curiosity because you have worked from last 30 years into the data space. So the question is that earlier people were using on premises, right?
Hmm.
Now
Yeah.
people are moving towards cloud. So
Hmm.
what has been the shift in terms of execution and the costing? Like, were the on premises cheaper than cloud, or as people have started moving and utilizing clouds quite extensively, so cloud is much more cost effective than the on premises? So that is because, why I'm asking this question, because a
Hmm.
lot of people want to move back to the on premises also. So I just want to like, from that perspective, what are your thoughts? How the on premises versus cloud things are there? If an organization has to take any decisions, what they should be choosing?
If you just look at the costs, I mean, if you have like on-prem, you have to buy the metal, right? You have to buy the servers, and no matter what kind of services you're using or not using, there's like a constant cost. That means if you manage to like level out the consumption of everything throughout the day, um, then on-prem might be cheaper because like buying something is usually cheaper than renting something. This applies to like the whole businesses. Right? If you buy a car, it might be cheaper than renting the car and pay it like per month or do a leasing or whatever financial things is possible for you or for your retailer. But the thing is that like the cloud offers more things, right? Especially if you have like not a constant level of consumption, the cloud might be very interesting because you can turn on services as you need them and turn them down again. With hardware you own on yourself on premises, this is just not possible, right? You cannot return half of the servers again to your retailer because you bought them, right? You have paid them and now you have to live with that decision. So this might be something you have to think of. I mean, if you have constant level or you can really, really predict what kind of consumption you will have, then on-prem might be cheaper. Yes. If it's changing up and down, then the cloud services might be a good option. This is, I think, valid since the cloud exists. On the other hand, I think it's a huge difference. It's not so much about the costs, but it's about like the services you can use. If you need a lakehouse in Fabric or in Azure, You just click a button, right? Press OK, and it's there, right? Maybe it takes a couple of minutes, but it's there. When you want to imitate this on your own services, then somebody has like to spin up a virtual machine, install services there, and then install the lakehouse feature there, and then give you access to this. So there might be much more maintenance in systems than you just have in the cloud. And if you later discover, oh, I don't need this lakehouse, I just tried it around, I didn't solve my problems, right? You just delete it again and it's gone. Like on-prem, you have to live with that you're now consuming something. I mean, you can turn off the machine, of course, the virtual machine, but still you have the hardware running around, which was prepared to host your lakehouse. So these might be differences. And I also think about if you think about employees, right? I guess, I mean, I'm not teaching at university, but I guess that people coming from the universities, coming from colleges and high schools, they are cloud natives. They're used to exactly what I just described. They're not prepared for like ordering something and then handing it over and then waiting for 3 weeks that somebody confirms the order and another 3 weeks before the hardware is shipped, another 3 weeks before everything is assigned and they can start working. They're used to just click a button and at least have a trial and try things out there and close it down again if you don't use it. So this might be a risk for companies who stay on-prem, right? That they miss out at like these features. You can just turn it on and off. They miss out like if they really need to scale up and down. But also like within your employees, it might end up in a problem that they're not. If you're used to this quick thing, right? Why would you want to work for a company where you have to wait for ages until you can play around with the new data or new software?
Definitely. So, very interesting points. Thank you so much for sharing. So, my next question is, you have been working on multiple projects, right? So, what has been the toughest project you have worked on, and what did you learn from it?
I mean, there's different things I see. Maybe I'm so much into data modeling, this might be like my classes. I look through the data modeling classes at many things. But if it comes to Power BI and performances, and also of course in Fabric, then with the semantic models, the data modeling is like under-evaluated and underestimated. People are always in a hurry, right? I mean, you get the data, you get access to the data. Of course, you have to build the reports and learn about the data, and you just jump into data visualization and do not too much about data modeling. And this is what I think should be the other way around, right? You should spend some time in learning about the data, finding out what's the best data model is. Example for Power BI, right? You should come up with facts and dimensions and assign all the attributes you have in the data sources to either one or the other and build your data model. And then, of course, analytics is much faster, much easier. DAX is easier to write. So this is like one of the outcomes. And I was a victim of this problem on my own, right? When I built my very, very, very first Power BI report, which went into production, I just loaded the data as it was from the system. And this was like a couple of hundreds rows in the tables. And they asked me, if I filter this one, I also wanted the filter going there. So I put a lot of bidirectional filters in there because this is what the customer asked me about. And it turned out that everything was so slow. I couldn't really understand because I thought everything is in memory, right? It's Power BI, everything is optimized for querying and fastness. I learned too late. I mean, I'm still ashamed about what I built there, but I learned at least from that. This is not the way to go, right? You have to spend first some time to understand the data and then build things. So this would be one of the things I sometimes see that's the root cause, right? Somebody complains about who comes to me, right, and can't figure out how to write the DAX calculation. Then we find out, yeah, it's really hard to write because the data model is like there's like so many tables interconnected or several ways, and convincing the DAX to use the right filters from one table to the other might be almost impossible to do. And then the problem is the data model.
Yeah. Absolutely. Still, many people face that problem. Oh, my dashboards are not loading.
Exactly,
Data,
yeah.
and because they directly connect the data, so it should not be there. So that is where the engineering comes in. First, we need to make sure we have the data models, we have the right quality of data in there, all right, and then we are putting on the top of it having the reports. Then it will not be a slow process, right? So
Exactly.
you have made a point over there. Okay, so last question I have is
Hmm.
that you mentioned that we can have a perfect data warehouse. We can have a star schema, but still the reporting tool is not right, or people don't know how to use it. Do you want to share some insights on this and how do we solve this challenge?
Everything's perfect, but still, like, people can't get the information out of there. And there might be several problems in there, right? One is maybe the data model, again, the data model I discussed, right? Data
Yeah.
warehouse, this might be a star schema or not. So this might be optimized, for example, for Power BI or for other tools. And this is not necessarily the same thing. This could be something. The other thing is that maybe people are not used to the new tool, right? They still think in the mindset of the existing tool, and then you introduce a new tool. Has nothing to do with Power BI. This has just something to do with change management. If you get a new tool, of course, you have your mindset and try to use the new tool with the mindset which you had applied to the old tool. And this can be a good idea. It could work out, but sometimes it doesn't really do. And so I think sometimes it turns out on education, right? We have to teach people how to work with the data warehouse, to work with this data model, to work with the new tooling. And the picture that comes into my mind is back in, I already told you that I'm around for decades in this business. But there was Tech at Europe in Berlin in 2009. Donald Farmer, I'm not sure if anybody yet know Donald Farmer, but he then was a program manager at Microsoft, and he introduced this new concept of Power Pivot to Excel, like the predecessor of Power BI Desktop, right? So before Power BI Desktop came to the world and GA in 2015, there already was this Power Pivot add-in in Excel, which is still there. It's not an add-in anymore. It's just baked into Excel. So if you load something in Excel into the data model, it's actually the
Mhm.
same Vertipack engine as Power BI. And he used on his slide deck, he used these medieval drawings showing two people, right, fighting with each other. And the analogy here was that there's a constant fight between domain experts and the IT department, right? This might be true for many companies, right? See themselves into different teams. Right? So working together is like the language is a little bit different, right? So this can be hard. And also Power Pivot, like the predecessor of Power BI Desktop, had the code name Gemini. And Gemini is Latin for twins. So the whole tool, like the whole concept of Power BI, was based on this idea there's like two type of people, more like the IT geeks or the IT department, and other people who are domain experts but not into the IT. While IT is not an expert about the business, right? This is natural.
Mhm.
So this analogy means that there might be still problems if those people don't work good together. And Power BI
Mhm.
tries to fit in here as it offers both enterprise BI and self-service BI thinking and innovation, right? If you look at Power BI Desktop, if I teach new people to it, they're sometimes confused. Why is those different ways of doing things?
Mhm.
And the reason is because like Power BI tries to satisfy as well self-service BI as also Power Enterprise BI, right? And
Mhm.
so the closer you get people to work together, the better it will be for the whole organization. And this means that you have to think about when does really Enterprise BI fit into the story and when does self-service BI fit into the story.
Mhm.
So if there's something like from a structure perspective, static reports, this is perfect for Enterprise BI. P&L, a balance sheet, or like this order list everybody needs every day. This should not be something where domain experts build them for themselves, but IT should provide this, right? On the other hand, business can change on a daily basis, right? You don't know what happens. Surprising things happen tomorrow, and then
Mhm.
have to find out what's the root cause for that. So you have to like analyze the data and do self-service BI. And so also
Mhm.
IT can provide those models and the access to data and also education to educate people how they can access data sources available and how to data is built up to make it more easy for self-service consumption. So this might be still this outbalancing story where you have to outbalance the thing between IT and domain experts, and you can never avoid self-service BI. And of course, you need some centralized data as well. So you need enterprise data as well. But have to try to fit those things as close together as possible.
Thank you so much for sharing that insight. It is
Sure.
really,
Thank you.
really amazing. All right. So that is what I wanted to ask you today, Marcus. And thank you for sharing your experience, your thinking, and how you approach data and the platforms, Fabric. Power BI and other things. It is really such amazing learning that you have shared from your experiences, and pleasure having you on the Executive Outlook.
The pleasure was all mine, Isha. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.